Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to this Lunch and Learn all about high converting social media at scale. My name is Sian Conway-Wood. I'm the Senior Managing Partner at 181st Street Communications. We're a behavioural communications agency that specialises in scaling challenger brands and particularly e-commerce brands. So social media and digital marketing is something we do day in, day out to help brands achieve that scalability. Before I was at 181st Street Communications, I was the founder of Ethical Hour, which was the world's largest online sustainability community that I built organically from scratch with absolutely no advertising spend on various different social media platforms. I've got 15 years experience in marketing and communications, and my work with Ethical Hour led to some amazing opportunities in the sustainability space, particularly becoming a UK Government Green Action Ambassador, being the UK Sustainability Influencer of the Year, and being able to write my book, Buy Better, Consume Less, which was published by Icon Books. In 2024 at 181st Street, our average ROI, return on investment on organic socials, was 5.2 to 1. And across industries, across the board, with all of the clients that we worked with, every pound that was invested in our services returned £6.23 in gross profit. So that's why I'm here today to talk to you about social media strategies that can really scale up your brand, but also be scalable in terms of the amount of effort and resources that you put into them. I'm very aware, I've worked with lots of small businesses, startups, scale-ups over the years, and obviously built a huge audience myself and my own business. So I understand that social media can really become a bit of a beast that we feel like we have to feed, a bit of a hamster wheel that we're stuck on. And especially in this day and age with the algorithm and with paid advertising on socials being where it is, not getting a lot of return back for that. So what we want to do today is break that pattern in your business and give you a methodology that you can follow to really scale up what digital marketing and particularly social media can do for you. I want to start by busting a really common myth that social media is not for selling. It's all about being social, and it's about building a community around your brand. Now, I built a community, and I built the world's largest sustainability community online. And then off the back of that, turned that into a business and a paid for community. But as a product-based business, social media is a tool to sell your product or service. It's not bad to be on there selling. When you sell a product or a service, you are helping your customers achieve an outcome that they are looking for and solving a problem for them. And by putting yourself out there and selling on social media, you are helping them find solutions to the problems that they have much quicker. And that's really important, because if you deviate too far from that and you try to build a community without being upfront and without trying to sell to them, and almost this cloak and dagger of hiding your product away, hiding that solution away, and just pulling people together on shared values, you're going to see very low conversion rates and you're going to see very low return on investment, because the people you are going to attract in that community are not necessarily the people that are going to buy from you. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with selling your product on social media if you have a product or service-based business. And typically you will find that anyone who is telling you that that is wrong and that you should be building a community has some vested interest in you building that community. Building a community is a very time-consuming and very expensive thing to do. You need a community manager to pull that community together and look after those people and nurture that relationship, those relationships. That is a time-consuming job. And it's also a job that's not particularly tied to performance or ROI. So there is nothing wrong with having a community manager if there is a genuine need for a community around your product or service and it is driving ROI for your brand. But we need to be really, really upfront that if we are selling a product or service, our social channels are a sales tool. So we always start any social media strategy or any wider marketing or advertising strategy by identifying who we want to speak to. People are not going to be annoyed if you are promoting a product or service to them if it is the right product or service for them, and if you are helping them on the journey to uncover why it's the right solution. People are going to be annoyed and say that you shouldn't be selling to them on social media if it's not right for them. So we want to make sure that we're setting out with the right messaging, the right visuals, and the right approach to talk to the people that are going to get benefit from our product or service. And we always need to start with a foundation of affordability, because with the best will in the world, we could have the very best product. It could be so aspirational and everybody could want it, but if they can't afford it, they are just never going to be able to buy it. So this is an example that we did recently for a clothing brand we were working with. And we started by understanding what the average person spends on clothing per month, depending on their age and their disposable income bracket. So you can see here on the left, this data was actually from Starling Bank, and this breaks down by age bracket the average salary. And it also shows us in that final column there, the top 10% of earners in that age bracket and what they earn. And then the research over on the right is assuming that people spend around 5% of their after-tax take-home pay on shoes and clothes, how much they need to earn to spend a certain amount. Now, we know that the price point for this clothing brand was in the £80 to £90 bracket. So we could tell that they would need to earn a minimum of £30,000 per year to be able to spend £100 per month. So we would then be taking up around 90% of their clothing budget for that month with one purchase. But the items that this brand was selling were not something that you would typically save over multiple months to be able to afford. It was a very practical, functional product, not necessarily a massively aspirational status symbol. So we needed to come in a single month purchase. So we needed to understand the purchasing behavior and the relationship to the investment there to be able to determine this. And then we needed to identify the minimum salary they would have to be earning. So for this example, an £80 to £90 price point in functional clothing, you're looking at a minimum annual salary of £30,000. If we then bring that back to the Starling data, we can see that that is going to be the top 10% of earners in the 22 to 29 age range. And we can target them based on education level, employment status, and also the areas of the country where they live. It's highly likely that if they are in that top 10%, they're going to be in a city, in an urban area. So we can do some targeting to reach them, but we don't want to really broadly target 22 to 29-year-olds because they're just not earning enough. So our minimum age bracket for this product is actually going to be 30, because that's where it starts to widen up to them earning enough to be able to buy this product in a single month's purchase. And obviously that determines our advertising targeting audience, but it also determines how we position the brand. Behaviorally, people are much more likely to buy if they see themselves reflected in a brand's imagery, and if they can relate to the tone of voice that that brand uses. So once we know the age, we can start to design what the social media presence needs to look like, what models we need to use, what tone of voice we need to write in, what style of video we need to produce, what photography style we're going to go with, to meet the expectations of people in that age bracket with that education level and with that employment status. So this is really the foundation to everything, starting with that affordability. It's also really important that we look at the minimum viable audience. So for whatever you're selling, you need to know who your minimum viable audience is and how big that audience is. This was an example that we ran for a beer brand a couple of years ago who were focusing all of their messaging on sustainability as the primary selling point. They had a huge revenue growth target, and we needed to work out how we were going to get them to that revenue growth target across their wholesale, their trade, and their D2C. So all of that was going to be supported by their social media strategy. So we started at the top with the UK adult population. And then we broke that down by viable age. Now, for alcohol in the UK, you are not allowed to advertise to anyone under the age of 25, and you're also not allowed to show anyone under the age of 25 or who could be under the age of 25 in your adverts. So we knew that we needed to go older than that into these age brackets to be able to target them with paid advertising and also our organic presence. So that immediately reduces that UK adult population down to only people that are over the age of 25. And we actually wanted to be well clear of that because of those advertising regulations. So that's the kind of next stage. And then you can see from there, we filtered to just men. The reason for that being that statistically, men are weekly and regular beer drinkers, whereas only 8% of women drink beer regularly. And to reach these income targets that the brand had and these growth targets, we knew that we needed to be targeting regular drinkers, people that were going to buy this brand's beer every single week, ideally, so that we could hit that lifetime value and bring that cost of acquisition down. So we were really focusing on viable audience with affordability within the regulatory requirements and who were most likely to be able to add lifetime value to the brand. From there, because of the price point, we could work out how much more expensive they were in market versus their other competitors. And we knew that because they were relatively more expensive, that we needed to target ABC ones. So this is the NRS scale, the social grades. And these are your higher managerial professionals, so the people with the most disposable income. So you can see that every single time we're adding in one of these layers as a filter, we are cutting down the size of the audience that we are able to speak to who have a likelihood of buying from us. We then layered in the statistics around the percentage that drink beer weekly or at home, weekly at home or in the pub, so that we knew that those were our lifetime value customers, which again, you can see is lowering that viable audience lower and lower. That took us to 2.6 million. So that's still a very viable audience. We could definitely hit the growth targets by converting a percentage of that. But then when we layered in who cares about sustainability on top, you can see that it drastically falls to a level where it just would not be possible. Even if we converted everybody in that audience, it would not be possible to meet the growth targets that they had set out. The way that we worked that out was based on the polling that YouGov does around what is the primary issue facing the country. At the time we did this, you can see it was 27%. That has actually fallen to around 17 to 18% now. So although there is widespread support, people do not see it as the primary issue facing the country, which means that it's probably not a primary influence in their purchasing decision. So that cuts the audience down to below viable levels. That tells us that something needs to change in the messaging and in the branding before we can roll this strategy out, because otherwise there just aren't enough customers in the world to pull in to buy from us. So we're never going to meet that growth target. Another really important thing to note is that your biggest audience isn't necessarily your most profitable one. So this is some analysis that we recently ran for an e-commerce brand. And we discovered that 18 to 34-year-olds were making up 56% of their site traffic. So you would probably look at this chart and you would say that is our most viable audience. They are the people that are engaging with our content and clicking through and coming to visit our site. And those are the people we should be positioning for and talking to. But when you layered this on with purchasing data and you looked at that proportionally, they were only accounting for 8.5% of revenue. So while they're interested in browsing the site, they are either not deeply engaging with the site, they're not finding the product relevant, or they're more price sensitive and the product is just simply out of their price range based on that affordability data we looked at earlier. In kind of contrast to that, when we looked at the 45 plus age brackets, Yes, they were only accounting for 2% of traffic, which seems much, much lower than the 18 to 34s. However, they were driving 4.5% of revenue. So proportionally, they were much likelier to purchase when they were visiting. And that's possibly because they have higher spending power or they're finding the product more suited to their needs. But whatever that reason is, we identified that we needed to grow that audience and reposition the brand and the socials to speak directly to that audience, because that's where the most profitability is going to be. So this is how we pull that together. Once we have that intelligence and we know who you should be targeting, we turn that into a target audience profile. You're probably going to have more than one target audience, and we don't like to lump big age groups and big generations in together. Your audience targeting should always be more focused on the psychographics and the reasons for purchasing and the psychological and behavioural drivers of a purchase than on age, gender, location, earnings alone. Those things, those demographic things are the absolute foundation for this is the minimum viable audience we can talk to, as I showed you in the example where we whittled down the audience. But then we want to layer on really understanding who our target customer is, what they're looking for when they buy from us, where we can reach them, how they consume media and what social channels do they use, what is their lifestyle like, what problems are showing up for them and what solutions are they looking for. And when we understand that, you get to the point that you can see here on the right, where you can actually start to identify their primary, secondary and tertiary purchase drivers and purchase influences. And once you know that, that starts to refine down into your tone of voice, into the content that you're going to put on social media to draw those people in, get their attention, and ultimately convert them into a customer and build lifetime value with them. A really key part of putting those profiles together is understanding the behavioural science behind how people buy. So whenever we make a purchase, we are somewhere on this scale, either low risk impulse purchasing or high risk considered purchasing, or somewhere in the middle. Now, it's really easy to assume that that is purely driven by the price point and how much disposable income we have, but we know that that's not true. We know there's so many other factors that go into how we decide to purchase. I always talk about the example of this for targeting and understanding this as how we choose where we're going to live. So if you are going to rent or buy a property to live in, you will have your list of requirements for that property. So how many people are going to be living with you there? That determines how many bedrooms you need. Do you need parking? How many cars do you have? What type of parking do you need? Do you need a drive, a garage, off-road, whatever you need there? What type of bathroom does it need to have? Do you need a downstairs toilet? Are you going to be working from home? So do you need an office space? How important is it to you that you have a garden? And so on and so forth. So you will make a list of all of these different things. And then when it comes to searching for properties to go and view, those will become the things that you filter by on platforms like Rightmove and Zoopla. So you'll know what your budget is, you'll know how many bedrooms and what property type you're looking for, and you'll tick the box for some must-haves. But when you actually step into that house or that flat and it's the one, you know it in your heart and you have a real emotional reaction. You've already pre-qualified it because you're only looking at ones that meet your minimum requirements, your minimum expectations, and then you're having that emotional reaction. And that's what we need to understand about our customers and the journey that they go on when they're buying our products or services. What are the head-driven, rational prerequisites that they need to have in place to be ready to buy from us? And then what are the emotional connections that are going to really convert them and make them fall in love with us and come back again and again? And we've also got to think about all the different factors that go into that decision. So the risk that's involved, what that purchase is going to say about them as a person, their self-identity and their relationship to the people around them. So for example, if you are the person in your family responsible for booking a holiday, That, yes, that's a financial decision. You have a set budget, but you also have a set amount of time. And if you only have one holiday a year and that's quality time with all the people that you love, there's a real social risk in getting that wrong because you're never going to get that time back. You've also got the pressure of having to keep everybody happy and balance all the different needs. You know, maybe someone wants a really sporty, active holiday and someone else wants to sit on the beach or go to the spa. So you have to find something that works for everybody. So that is a lot of pressure, and that shifts that up the considered purchase scale, not just because of the price, but because of all of the other things that hinge on you making the right decision. We also have to factor in the functional complexity. So how quickly I have a problem, I want to buy a product or service to solve that problem. How quickly, in relation to how much I've paid, am I going to get a return on investment? Am I going to get that positive validation that my problem is going away? And also, how much energy do I have to put into making that work? Because that's going to be a factor at play as well. So all of these things go into determining those primary, secondary, and tertiary purchase drivers that we put into this target audience profile. It's really important that we also understand how the algorithm works. So we could do a whole separate webinar about this, and it would probably be out of date in a few weeks because they do chop and change. But really, the fundamental principle across platforms and across all of your social media strategy is understanding that the goal of the social media platforms is to keep us consuming on the platform, to keep us active, to keep us entertained, to keep us scrolling, because the longer we're scrolling for, the more data they can gather from us, which means they can target more ads, and the more ads they show us, the more money they make. We are the product for them, so they want to keep us engaged, which means that from you as a content creator, what they want is highly engaging content. So what we need to remember as the fundamental of this is we don't want to try and appeal to our customers' interests. Yes, we want to serve up content that interests them and pulls them in and brings them to us. And the more that we show the algorithm what our content is about, the more they will push it to people that have those interests. But if we just pander to what they are interested in and we create content about that isn't directly relevant to our product or our service, we're going to fall into the engagement trap where we attract a lot of people, we get a lot of engagement and a lot of follows, but the conversion rate is really low because what they're actually following us for is content that is about something other than our product or service, and they are not necessarily potential buyers that sit within our target audience. So we don't want to try and appeal to our customers' interests. We do want to make our product or service interesting to them. So we need to understand why they would be interested in it, what problem it would solve for them. And that's the message that we need to be putting out onto our social media to bring in more potential buyers. Sustainability businesses and small businesses in particular tend to fall into this trap. They either share a lot of behind the scenes, how they're building the business, and then you get a lot of fellow business owners follow you get a lot of supporters, but not everybody in that audience is primed and ready to buy or has the affordability or the basic requirements. Or you talk a lot about sustainability and ethics, so you attract in people that share your values, but aren't necessarily interested in your product or service. So when it comes time to promote that, you don't get the engagement and you don't get the conversion. And again, that is the difference between building a community around your brand and building an interest base around your product or service. One of the big fears that we encounter a lot, particularly from brands that have a very small team, are at the early stages of scaling up, or are still very much hands-on founder-led, is that they worry that they are selling too much on social media and that social media is not a place to make sales. And actually, behavioural science suggests otherwise. You will get much better results from your social media if you show your product much more on your feed. So here you can see two examples of clients that we worked with. On the left, you've got a brand that was not posting very regularly at all, was using a lot of stock imagery, primarily because they didn't have a big library of their own photography, and because their product is coffee, so it does align itself well to using stock imagery. And we're focusing on things like the sourcing and the storytelling behind the product, and a lot on the ethics and the small business element as well. And then on the right over here, you've got an underwear brand that, again, were very, very focused on their charity impact, their B Corp status, their values, but not really telling the story of their product, not showing their product often enough, and just positioning themselves really firmly in that sustainable small business space. So attracting a lot of supporters, but when we dug down into the analytics, we're really not getting sales from these platforms. So you can see that our approach was to ramp up that mere exposure effect. And the mere exposure effect tells us that when we're looking to buy something, we don't keep a list of all the potential brands that could sell us that product. And we very rarely, unless it's a really considered purchase, we very rarely actually sit down and weigh up the pros and cons and do a lot of consideration. Obviously, that does depend on where you sit on that impulse to considered scale. But typically, when we are ready to buy, we reach for the brand, the product that is at the front of our mind. That's what we Google, and then that's what we end up purchasing. Or that's what we plug into Amazon and we go for the one that is the most available to us. And that the way that we can position our brands to be ready for that and to be that front of mind is the mere exposure effect, which basically says that just by being present and by showing them yourself, your product, your service again and again and again, you can actually build trust through familiarity so that you are front of mind when they're ready to buy. Most people looking at your social media today are not ready to buy today, but they might be ready in a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. And if you are consistently showing up and consistently reminding them that your product exists and it is the solution to this problem that they maybe don't even know they have yet, they will remember you front of mind when they experience that problem and when they are ready to buy. So you can see here in the after shots how we transformed their social media feeds to be very product focused without losing the impact, without losing the storytelling, but just finding a way to do that through more product imagery and more reels and more videos. And this actually delivered an average of 45% increase in sales for across these two clients. So you definitely need to be showing your product more. You definitely need to not be scared of selling and showing up and showing your product on social media. So this was for another client who was, again, very focused on the small business storytelling and had built a very good support network for that, but again, wasn't really seeing those conversions. Now we know that the platforms all want video first, and this can be really difficult because producing video can be much more time intensive and more resource heavy than using an image library that you already have. So this client, when they came to us, were producing around 1 video a week for social media, and we're getting the founder to talk to camera. So it was quite a lengthy process and quite a resource heavy process to produce those videos. And when they were talking to camera, they were talking about the business, not about the products. When we suggested to them that they should scale up video and that they should make their videos all about their products, they were worried that people really wanted to hear the small business and, again, didn't want to be sold to on social media. So we ran it as an experiment. We produced some videos that were purely product focused, and we increased the amount of videos that we were able to put out per week because they weren't reliant on someone being interviewed and having the time to go through that process. We designed them so that people would be enticed in and encouraged to watch as much of the video as possible using interesting visuals, interesting music, and that was really important. And one of the main metrics we track when it comes to video is the average watch time, because there is a lot of research that shows that the longer somebody watches something, the greater the recall is, so the more memorable it is. And in advertising, if you can get people to stick around for just 2 seconds, their ability to recall that ad jumps from 25% to 45%. So if we think back to the mere exposure effect and being front of mind when somebody's ready to buy, that becomes really, really significant. The longer they watch, the stronger the recall. And the algorithm also notices that it takes into account the percentage of a video that you watch. So did you only watch 1% of that video, or did you watch 90% of it? Doesn't matter how long that video is. What matters is how long they spent in relation to the length of that video watching it. And that is counted as an engagement metric. And the more engaging it is, the more it gets pushed out. But that is only productive for you if what they are watching is relevant to what you want them to buy from you. So you can see here, the green line is the product focused videos and the blue line is the small business focused videos. And this is the average percentage of the video that they watched. And actually, although the business was really convinced that the small business stuff was the most engaging and was what their audience wanted, and they were really scared to show their products, you can see for yourself the jump in engagement, in watch time on those product focused videos, much, much higher than the small business storytelling they were doing. And of course, that led to greater conversion rates as well. So let's talk about, with all of this in mind, how you can scale up your content production, because a really big part of success here is increasing the amount of content that you put out. With Instagram, for example, only about 5% of your followers see a good post, a post that performs fairly well. We know that reach is down across the board on social media. So to combat that, we want to increase our output and we want to be posting more regularly. We recommend to clients that they get to 2 posts per day on Instagram and 1 post per day on the other channels. And that will start to see a really significant uptick in engagement, in interactions, and in click-throughs and conversion, as long as they are doing that by being product focused. So how do we do that without it becoming somebody's full-time job, without it becoming the need for an entire team to manage it, and without it burning anybody out? We need a scalable system. So we start by planning out the year. In our agency, we actually borrow a media planning tool from the political campaigning world. That is the background of a lot of members of our team. And in political campaigning, you plan on a day-by-day basis across the year, and you map out what messages are going to be relevant on what days. So we found that a lot of in-house teams will be planning monthly or weekly and are usually quite shocked when we drill down day to day. But that does really help you get really clear about where you need to be active and where you can automate. So you plan out your year on a day-to-day basis, and you map out any relevant business milestones, retail milestones, awareness days, industry events, and then purchasing behavior, so paydays and purchase opportunities. If you have something that is giftable, for example, then Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, Christmas, Golden Quarter, any product launches that you're going to do, any relevant trade shows, etc. So you get your entire year as mapped out as you can, internal and external milestones. And then you go through that and you decide which of those need a dedicated campaign or in the moment content, and you map those into the calendar. So some awareness days, for example, will be much more relevant to you than others. And some will be a real purchase driver, and some will just be either a nice to have or an awareness raising. So which need dedicated campaigns, and which points will you be creating specific content for those points? You can then identify your key messages. So using your purchase drivers from your audience target profiles. What does your customer need to hear to be ready to buy from you? What journey do you need to take them on from becoming aware of you to being ready to buy? And what are the gaps that differentiate you from your competitors? So we'll come back to this in just a moment. From there, you need to establish your tone of voice to be able to speak to your target customers in a way that is going to convert them. And then to fit around those dedicated campaigns, of which there's probably not actually going to be that many throughout your year, we are going to create a body of video first, product focused, evergreen content to fill those gaps. So this is how we do that analysis of where the gaps are in your market. So this was for a company that we worked with in the clothing sector. And we took their top 3 main competitors who were very high performing on social media, were outspending them on digital advertising, and had greater market share. And we looked at their core messages versus the client's core messages. And as you can see, started to map out so we could identify what key messages were going to resonate with our target audience the most. And out of those, where was there a gap in the market? So this helped us to get to the point where we could say what the messaging of our campaigns was going to be and what the key themes of our evergreen content was going to be, bringing our product into line with what our customers cared about. So we're always staying product focused, and we're telling them all the things they need to know from us to be ready to buy and to decide that our brand is the right brand for them. From there, we design a tone of voice. So again, thinking about those demographic factors, the age group, the education level, where else they shop, what else they're used to, how people and businesses communicate with them regularly, and designing a tone of voice that really fits for our primary target audience, and also a visual style as well. So this may be picking out the very best examples of the most highly targeted imagery you already have, as in this case on screen. This is a real client example. Or if you haven't got imagery yet, it may be choosing stock imagery or examples out in the real world that really dictate where you want to be positioned visually, so that you can brief your photography team to produce that for you. Once you have those foundations in place, you can start to build out your evergreen content library. So your evergreen content is content that could be posted at any time and it would still be relevant. It's not time specific. So it's not about Christmas and we can't post it in July, for example. You can reuse the same content every 28 days, and behaviorally, people won't notice that it's a repeat. However, we do recommend spacing that out 60 to 90 days, just to make sure that you're really clear and that you're not using the same content over and over again all of the time. But you can build a library of evergreen content that can be reused really, really regularly. So our aim when we're doing this is to refer to that giant calendar of the year, work out how many days are going to be taken up by your time-specific campaigns, so your product launches, your Christmas campaign, your Mother's Day campaign, for example, and then fill the rest of the days with evergreen content. Now, let's say that you had 250 days left around those time-specific campaigns. That does not mean that you need 250 posts. You can reuse content every 60 to 90 days. So really, we want to build a library of 60 to 90 really high quality posts that could go out at any time. Obviously, if Instagram is our primary channel, we're aiming for 2 posts per day. So we would be looking for double that, 120 plus basically. And we'd want a really strong ratio of video to static imagery for all of our platforms, because they're all moving to video first. But really, that sets the target for how much content we want to produce about our products, the products that are always going to be in stock, the products we always sell, a permanent collection, 60 to 90 days worth of content about those that can be slotted in and reused throughout the year. And we don't need to worry about what the grid looks like or how we're telling a story over time and how we're building a narrative. Narrative is important in each individual post, but in terms of over time, you actually can't control the order in which people see your posts anyway. So we don't need to worry about that. Particularly as the algorithms move to become more interest-based and promote more video, and the lifespan of posts gets longer on some of these platforms. You could post something on LinkedIn today and it wouldn't take off, but it might actually gain traction in a few weeks' time because it will be served to people, because that topic has become relevant, they've shown an interest in it, and it will be bumped up the feed. So you can't actually control the order in which people are seeing your content. And Instagram have even said that they are working on the ability for us to move the grid around. So how we style the grid is so much less important than the aesthetic of the individual posts and the narrative within the individual posts. So what we want to do is aim for that evergreen, repeatable content that's high quality, speaks to our target audience, showcases our product, and can be reused every 60 to 90 days. And it's really, really important that we get that imagery piece right. That is also the key to effective advertising. And advertising does not work in a silo. So digital ads are unfortunately not going to be the fix if your conversion rate is low, if your engagement is low, if organic socials aren't performing. Yes, there are some brands that do not have an organic social presence and just rely on ads, but that is a very expensive way to do it. It increased the wastage within your budget because you're not converting as many people as you could be. And it's a very risky approach to take, as we have seen in recent times, that platforms can be banned, algorithms can change, a competitor could always come along and outspend you. So somebody is not going to see your ad and immediately click through to buy. A very small percentage of people might do if they are at the bottom of your funnel, but they only got to the bottom of your funnel because either they have an immediate need that you are solving, and if that is the case and they're only buying because you solve that need and they just discovered you, they are more price sensitive and less brand loyal. So you are less likely to get lifetime value out of that customer. The chances are that they are actually converting because they have interacted with your brand elsewhere. They've hit those 7 to 11 touch points that we need with people before they are ready to know, like, and trust us enough to buy. The likelihood is they will see your ad for the first time, click through to your profile, follow you, and engage with your content and be ready to buy later down the line. So your advertising is only going to be as effective as your organic social media is. And that means that imagery and video quality is going to be the key. So the key product that you are featuring should take up at least 80% of the frame in any image that is going to work as an advert. And what we would really strongly recommend is that when you are designing your organic socials and you are shooting your organic socials, that you try to think in an advertising mindset, because any post that takes off and does well organically would likely do well as an ad. And that works the other way as well. If it doesn't do well organically, it's not going to do well just because you've put advertising budget behind it. So we really want to design posts that can be boosted if they do well and posts that can be turned into ads if they do well. So making your product at least 80% of the frame, and just making sure that every product in that image is something that you sell. M&S famously got into trouble for this in the example you can see here. We know they have an ongoing rivalry with Aldi over their caterpillar cakes, but when they were advertising this garden furniture set last summer, the wine on the table was actually an Aldi bottle of wine. Now, we know that M&S has a food hall, that they sell wine, so this was a really, really kind of rookie error on their part to not have the wine in that shop that's for sale. It's unlikely that someone is going to see this and want to buy the wine, but we want to always be reinforcing our own brand, not our competitors. They also famously got into trouble because they were once showing an outfit, and I can't remember if it's the trousers or the jumper, but everyone was commenting, let's say it was the jumper. Everyone was saying, well, we really love that jumper. Where is it on your website? And that was actually not something they sold. The advert was about the trousers. So we want to make sure that we're being really careful to not drive engagement that goes nowhere. And for advertising to really work, we need enough variety. So that you do cap out on the amount of times that people can see one advert without getting annoyed by it and without switching off and not being influenced by it anymore. So we want to make sure that within our ads catalog, we're serving up enough different images, and that means doing this at scale. So when we produce campaigns for clients for organic and digital ads, we do a giant photo shoot, and we did one for the fashion brand we worked with that you saw on the grid comparisons there, where across 2 days we reshot 90% of their e-commerce imagery and enough photography and videography to create evergreen content that would last them for 2 years of rolling that campaign out. So we have a big photography studio and we divide that into 4 stations, one to do the e-commerce, one to do the photography, one to do the videos, and one to do a slightly different variation on the photography, so that we've got organic photography and ads photography, but the two are going to work together. And in that time, doing that factory line approach, we did 2 days in the studio and we shot thousands of images to give them enough content for 2 years and full scale advertising. So this can be done. It doesn't have to be really daunting. It doesn't mean you need a full-time photographer on your staff. It just means that you need to take a logistics driven approach and think about your advertising first, but design your organic socials with your advertising in mind, and vice versa. When it comes to measuring the success of these strategies, the key metrics that we look at are how this is functioning within your funnel and what results it's driving for you. So we're not overly interested in vanity metrics. We're interested in performance and conversion over time. So we like to monitor on a weekly basis accounts reached, percentage of non-followers reached, because that is showing you how much of your existing audience you're nurturing lifetime value with and how many new potential leads you're bringing into your funnel. And we match that by keeping an eye on your follower demographics to ensure that they stay in line with our target customers and that we're not just attracting supporters who don't go anywhere. And then we want to look at views as well. So how many people are engaging with our content and seeing our product on a weekly basis. And as you can see from the charts in the middle here, we monitor this before we launch the campaign and after the campaign to see that step up in averages. And then we monitor that on a quarterly basis. So you're always going to have mountain range graphs by monitoring on a weekly basis because the algorithm will affect it, seasonality will affect it. There will be so many different factors that create those peaks and troughs. But what we really care about is that average going up every single quarter? Because that means we are creating lifetime value with existing customers. We are reaching new potential customers and bringing them into our funnel, and we are engaging all of the people that we're talking to, and we are exposing them to our product, and we're achieving that mere exposure effect that will feed a successful advertising strategy and our conversion rate. So I just wanted to break down before we finish the kind of old way of doing this versus the way that I've presented you today, the new way, and a cost comparison, because doing it at scale like this can feel like it's going to be a big undertaking at the beginning, but it drastically improves your ROI. It makes your social media much, much easier to manage and look after going forward, and it is actually cheaper to do. So here are some average costs that have been researched and pulled together based on 2024 and 2025 data. So the average social media manager in the UK is going to cost you on a full-time salary around £34,500 per year, plus all of your employer contributions to things like pensions, national insurance, etc. A community manager is going to come in slightly less at around £32,000 per year. But as we discussed earlier, that is a role that is not directly attributable to ROI. And the same with social media managers, really. They are not necessarily roles that you can attribute sales targets and ROI to. So they are a cost center to the business rather than an investment. Your photography, typically you're looking at around £10,000 upwards per shoot. And if you are shooting to feed the hamster wheel all the time, you're probably going to need around 4 shoots per year as a minimum to ensure that you're doing that seasonality and you're pumping out fresh content all the time. If you want to work with influencers, obviously the costs can massively vary, but let's say that as a scale-up brand, you're looking for micro influencers. So between 10,000 and 100,000 followers. We're not looking to work with big celebrities. We're looking to work in that mid-range of micro influencers. They, on average, charge between £250 and £600 per post. So that can get very expensive very quickly. And just remember with influencers that the 5% rule applies to them as well. So 5% of people see your post if it's a high-performing post, which means that, yes, they may have an audience of 100,000 people, but statistically only 5% of people are going to see the post that they do about you. And then if we knock down click-throughs and conversions from there, you're looking at 5% of 5% of 5%. That becomes very, very expensive per conversion. And usually that's money better spent and with a better ROI, pumping it into digital advertising. But there is a time and a place for influencers. And if you want to build brand awareness very quickly, it can be a very good way to do it. So don't necessarily discount it. But again, a cost center to the business, not necessarily something that can be directly attributed to a successful ROI. And then you're probably going to need copywriters, designers, other freelancers from time to time as well. And the average freelance rate in the UK this year is £500 per day. So it's really not uncommon for bigger brands, scale-up brands, where the founder isn't doing it all themselves, they're not a startup, to be spending in the region of £20,000 per month when you start to include those salaries of the staff doing it, just to maintain those organic socials before you even layer in an ads budget and before you even start to look at ROI and attributing that to sales targets. So that suddenly becomes a very, very expensive way of essentially raising brand awareness, possibly not even with the right audience that are going to buy from you, and definitely without any conversion focus there. The way we do it, the way I described there on the photo shoots, we do 1 to 2 of those photo shoots per year. And in that time, we produce all of the evergreen photography, videography, and advertising assets at once. We do those photo shoots because we have an in-house team and an in-house studio. The prices on those start around £5,000 per shoot. And if you work with us on an annual retainer, that can be spread across the annual retainer. So that cost comes right down. We batch create that content and we reuse it on those behaviorally proven patterns. So it does no harm to your brand. It actually benefits your brand because you get that mere exposure effect, that familiarity, and that increases the willingness to buy. It keeps engagement high because it is highly targeted to the right target audience for you, and it brings your monthly production costs right down. We put much less focus on community building, and that makes management of channels much easier. It also removes the need for a full-time role. And again, it doesn't harm your brand because we're being very targeted and very conversions focused. So you may see engagement drop, but just like the brand with the high volume of traffic in the younger audiences, that volume is dropping because those are people that were not going to buy from you anyway. Typically, we very, very rarely recommend working with influencers, and we often look for ways to engage and work with your existing customers instead. So a lot of the campaigns we've run have featured real people, real customers from brands, and that not only makes it much more relatable, which again increases conversion, but also makes your community feel very involved, does all the good bits of community building, but at a much less intense to manage level for you. And it can increase lifetime value because if you're in the advert for something, very likely that you're going to continue buying it and recommend it to all of your friends as well. So we are a full service agency, which is how we are able to do this at scale and provide this. We have everybody in-house on the team that you would need for this to happen and to deploy this entire strategy end to end, including the advertising. And the average cost of working with a full service agency like us ranges from around £2,000 to £10,000 per month, depending on the scope and depending on the scale. So that really depends on the growth target you want to reach and how quickly you want to get there. So one of the big benefits of this is obviously it's cheaper than the costs on the previous slide where you have full-time teams, etc. But it also removes the need for multiple freelancers. So it avoids those silos of work's happening over here, but they're not talking to each other. That starts to harm performance very quickly. So it removes those silos, and it also removes the need for somebody in your organization to be managing 5 to 10 different people at any one point. There is one single point of contact, one agency that you're engaging with, you're connecting with the senior team, and then we are dispersing it throughout the team to get that production for you. And all of this means that we get a much higher ROI because all of the channels are working together to build your brand, build your funnel, and drive those conversions at the bottom of it. So in 2024, our average return on investment on organic socials was 5.2 to 1. On digital advertising across multiple different industries, we achieved an average ROAS of 589%. Most agencies are around 300 to 400%. And in 2004, every pound that our clients invested with us returned £6.23 in gross profit. So this scalable approach, this scaled up approach really, really does work, focusing higher amounts of content on your product and really targeting down to the minimum viable audience that is likely to buy from you and tailoring your content to them in this evergreen way with dedicated campaigns for key purchase moments really does increase your conversion and is a much more cost-effective and easier to manage way to get to your business growth targets. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you would like any advice on your social media strategy, then please do drop me a message.